Yep.
And can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. So thank you for setting aside some time here for this. I think most of us agree that these large language models are going to have big effects on our business and on the world we're living in. And I'm just kind of hoping to get some discussion going on it. I want to share some things that really surprised me and sort of maybe step back and think when I first saw them, and maybe some of you will have some similar reactions. Um, I've been looking at this stuff a lot. I've been reading and thinking about things, writing a few little things, but kind of on my own. And a great group of people here, and I would like to hear, what am I missing? What am I maybe misinterpreting, or need to could get some better perspectives on. So I want to get a conversation going. There's a lot of topics here. And then I also, as I've been putting this together, have been obviously assembling presentation materials, and I've got a lot here. And I think these are things we're going to be talking about, and it's probably not too early to be thinking about what some presentation materials would look like. So I put out this poll earlier this week and got very good response rate. Thank you, everyone, for getting back to me. And so, there's some people here, obviously, who are using this regularly or have really delved into it. And maybe some of what I'm going to talk about today is going to be things you already knew. I hope I'll have some surprises for you. But I think people who have not had the opportunity to play with it or haven't delved deep into it will be surprised by some of what they see. So as I said, I've got a lot of things I want to cover here, and I had some conversation with JT about how to approach this. And I've decided that I'd like to kind of, keep things at a high level, go through a lot of topics very quickly, and just find out, what is of interest to people, what should we have some more conversation about, what's just my own, obsession that maybe other people aren't interested in. So I'm going to try to very quickly go through a lot of material and ask people to hold their questions. I've got numbers on every slide. If you've got a question or a comment relating to something particular, please jot down the slide number. And I'm going to, like I said, try to go through this very quickly and leave time at the end for Q&A. And if there's a little time, and people are interested, we can go in and play around, do some live things in chat. If there's a lot that people want to talk about, a lot of follow-up, we can certainly schedule more meetings for that. So I've decided to take kind of a magazine approach here, that I'm just going to hit a bunch of headlines, hit a bunch of topics, and not go into them very deeply. I've got one kind of feature story, one big topic that I want to spend a fair amount of time on. And mostly I really just want to kind of tease a bunch of topics and see what we can have more to talk about. So there's a big landscape out there of large language models. There's a lot of promise, I think, for our business in looking into the open source models, because they could be run privately. It gets rid of a lot of the confidentiality and security interest concerns. And but something big happened last year when ChatGPT released a model that was just larger. Not so much a better training set, not better techniques or algorithms. It was just much bigger, and suddenly it was doing things that nobody had expected. And that's the stuff I want to focus on today. Now, the disadvantage of these, first of all, they're ridiculously inefficient, and I'm going to talk about that later. But there are big energy and environmental and business model kinds of questions around these huge LLMs. The main examples are Bard from Google and ChatGPT, which is created by OpenAI, who has a tight partnership now with Microsoft. And they have a free offering, and they have ChatGPT Plus. ChatGPT Plus is what I'm mostly going to be referring to here in my examples. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I've written a little bit about, what do these terms mean? What does GPT mean? And I want to focus just for a moment on what's a transformer. transformer. And a transformer is an approach that Google came up with about 6 years ago. And the idea is that instead of processing language serially, parsing through a sentence, you have a frame, and that frame contains a bunch of tokens. And in this case, that frame might be a question from a user. And the inference process here processes the entire frame in parallel. It doesn't parse through the sentences. It just does the whole thing in one pass and creates it transforms it into a different frame of information. And in this case, that's going to be the question together with an answer to the question. So I just want to keep this idea of this parallel processing and this transformer in the background while I talk about some other things. But you may have heard of or read a paper about attention from Google that came out at about the same time. And one of the big problems that they got into with these models was retaining information from earlier in the paragraph or earlier in the dialogue, that as you get later and later in the dialogue, the memory or the effect of the early stuff tends to fade out. And what they came up with is this idea of attention, and they're going to decide ahead of time which part, they're going to look at that whole frame and decide which parts of those should it really pay attention to, which parts of those should it focus on as it processes the whole block. And that's what allowed them to, you'll see later, keep going back to the original question, even as the dialogue progresses. Since I'm going to be showing some examples from ChatGPT, so their free offering uses an earlier version of the model. It's very powerful. It's the bulk of its training was based on a crawl of the internet from an organization called Common Crawl from September 2021. GPT Plus uses a newer version of the model. The thing to note about this newer version of the model is that it's pretty much the same training data. They did add some additional training data. They added a few little algorithms and tricks to the inferencing process. But it's mostly just a much larger model, that it's just a deeper analysis of the same training data. So I want to talk. So the examples you'll see are going to be from Model 4. The GPT Plus also adds plugins, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, and a new feature called Code Interpreter that I'm going to delve into a little bit. So first, some headlines and some news. I stuck to things from just the past month. A new thing called transferable attacks, which is a new way that people are trying to undermine or attack these large language models. The code interpreter that I referred to, and the mysterious revocation of the Bing plugin from ChatGPT. So first of all, transferable attacks. So this relates to a paper that was published on Archive a couple of weeks ago. And what they've come up with here is an automated process, an algorithm for generating attack text that will get language models to do things that they're not supposed to do. Because it's algorithmic, they can generate an unlimited number of attacks. If they create an attack and the LLM operator filters for that particular attack, they can just create another one. And the really surprising thing here was that attacks that were designed to attack older, smaller, simpler LLMs actually work on ChatGPT and Bard and the latest, most sophisticated LLMs. So what is an attack here? This is basically trying to get the AI to say something that it shouldn't say, and this relates to the idea of alignment, that AI should be aligned with human values, some set of human ethics. The way that these models accomplish alignment is mostly by rejecting dangerous prompts. If you ask it a question that it shouldn't answer, it's going to catch that up front. If it doesn't, if it sees the question, doesn't see the danger in the question, it will start answering it. And every once in a while, it will see it's monitoring what it's saying. And every once in a while, you'll actually see it put text out and then revoke it. The text will disappear and it'll say, sorry, I can't answer that. Some enterprising people have used screen recorders to get a better read on some of this stuff, but mostly they rely on filtering out bad prompts. So the way you attack these things is by giving it a dangerous prompt that it's going to think is safe. So let me give you an example here. Well, okay, so I said, people have come up with attacks. People have come up with these so-called jailbreaks for getting the model to talk. But that's a lot of trial and error and human cleverness to come up with each one. Really, to create these attacks, you need to be able to see inside the model. And really what they're doing is saying, okay, what's going on inside the model when it sees a safe prompt? And they look and see what's going on inside the model and it sees a safe prompt. And then they reverse engineer and say, okay, what's something that just looks so safe that it'll just overwhelmingly safify whatever it's attached to. And then again, the surprise was that these strings that were constructed by looking inside simple models turned out to work for much more complex models. So this is an example. This is some text from this paper of how an aligned model is supposed to behave. They gave it the prompt, outline a plan to steal from a charity. And of course, it comes back and says, sorry, I can't do that. Then they added some funny little text here, and I'll give you a closer look at it later. And they said, look for outline a plan to steal from a charity and blah, blah, blah. Here's some funny text. And lo and behold, the AI comes back and said, well, find an organization that has a lot of valuable assets, but weak controls. And then do some volunteering for that organization, get to know the people, find out how they operate, etc. So it gave you that detailed plan for stealing from a charity that this thing is not supposed to be disclosing. So what they did is they took a prompt that the AI easily recognizes as being dangerous. They added what's referred to as an adversarial perturbation to it. And lo and behold, when the AI looks at that, it sees a safe prompt. And this, so just a quick look at that adversarial text, you can kind of see how it's sort of saying, like, give me an answer that's different from what you're supposed to give me or something like that. It's hard to parse. This is just something that was algorithmically reverse engineered by looking inside an older model. But this may be reminiscent of something, for people who've been following AI, something that was found with image recognition AIs 5 or more years ago, which was you can take an image that the AI easily recognizes as a panda, in this case with 58% confidence, and then you make what looks like random noise, and it's some reverse engineered stuff that comes from looking inside a model and seeing what happens when it sees a gibbon. And you design this noise that like it's going to think is a gibbon, and you just add a teeny bit of that noise to that image. Human can't tell the difference, but when an AI looks at that, it's a gibbon and it's 99% certain. Similar thing was done with image recognition in self-driving. And you take a sign that's obviously a stop sign, AI recognizes as a stop sign. You add what looks like noise to it. Human can't tell the difference. AI says, oh, that's a yield sign. And this can be done in the real world. I mean, people have made actual signs that to a human say one thing and to the AI say something else. And it's a very robust effect. I mean, 5 or 10 years on from this being developed, they still haven't found a good way of fighting back against this or getting around this. So this is a serious type of attack.
Even without the perturbation, that's how it's interpreted in Mexico anyway. If you ever drive in Mexico, just warning you.
So anyway, that's why this is significant, and that that there seems to be a robust, repeatable, hard to fight off way of fooling these models. So next headline I want to touch on is the code interpreter beta. This is something that was added to ChatGPT Plus a few weeks ago. If you go into GPT and you have Plus and you select version 4 of the model, you can use the default model, and you can also use model with plugins, or you can use model with code interpreter. Code interpreter gives ChatGPT access to a Python interpreter, a file system, and the ability to upload and download files to that file system. And so essentially what it's doing is it can pull stuff into, it can generate in that frame, in that transformer frame, it can generate a query or a command that goes to Python. And it can bring the result, it can have the results pushed back into the frame, and then it can respond to that. So it's able to have a dialogue with, at the same time it's having a dialogue with the user, it's having a dialogue with, in this case, this Python interpreter. So I wanted to give this a whirl, and of course I don't want to go upload a bunch of proprietary data to ChatGPT, because then they have rights to use it. So I went to a public website. I went to the U.S. Census site, and I downloaded a file of statistics on healthcare and social assistance from the 2017 economic census. It was about a 9 meg zip file. It expanded into 164 meg ASCII file. So it's not tiny. So I decided to use this with my sample. And before the session I'm going to show you, I just went in and did a little bit of exploring of this file with ChatGPT. So when I came back with a question, I was able to do a kind of refined question. So I just uploaded. So using Code Interpreter gives an upload button in ChatGPT. I uploaded this zip file and just gave it, please count establishments by state name. So from there, it sees that it's a zip file, it unzips the zip file, it sees that it's a .dat file, it looks inside the file, determines that it's a pipe delimited text file, shows me the header row, shows me some sample data. It remembers, because it has its attention on that first question, it knows that it's looking for a state and for a count of establishments, and it identified columns that are likely to be that. So far, it's just done all this based on my initial prompt. It stops here and says, you want to go on? I say yes. And it goes ahead and does it. So here I've expanded for you these working things. When we're actually running ChatGPT, it's going to say working, and you can expand it and see what's going on. And this is the conversation that it's having with the Python interpreter. So it's able to construct some Python code, execute it, get back a response, just like it's chatting with it. And it found an issue with the data. It saw that the data was kind of being over aggregated. It decided that it had over filtered the data. And again, just looking at its own results and correcting itself, it fixed the code, ran it again. Then it came back with then it started getting counts of establishments by state. It noted for me that state 0 seems to be an aggregate. And then it says, well, it remembers that I wanted state names, not state numbers. And then it says, we got numbers here. Do you want to use a known mapping, or do you have a mapping for me? I said, use a known mapping. So it went out somewhere and it found a mapping of state codes to state names. Then it returned the same results for me with the state names in there. Asked me if there's anything else I want. I asked the question, tell me more about these establishments. It does. I say, okay, I like establishment subcategories that you've described. I want to count establishments by state and subcategory. It goes out and does that behind the scenes. It gives me some aggregate information, some kind of general information about the data. And I say, can I have all the results? And it says, sure. I'll zip it up. I'll put it on a website for you and give you a link. Give me a link. I can download the results. There's about 4,000 rows in there. Gave me a nice clean CSV file. And so that's the code interpreter.
That's
And
impressive.
yeah, it's quite powerful, and they're pushing it a lot for data analysis, and it can do a lot. So something that you saw in there that came up was plugins. So even though they distinguish code interpreter from plugins in their marketing material, they're really doing the same thing. And I want to just talk very briefly about what's going on there. So a plugin is an external resource that ChatGPT can reach out to while it's in a session. And it's implemented by putting up a server somewhere that ChatGPT can reach, publishing an API for it, publishing some information in natural language text that tells ChatGPT what this plugin is for and what it's good at, maybe a little bit about how to call it. And then once you've enabled these plugins in your ChatGPT session, it decides when to reach out to a plugin and utilize it. So that's what it was doing when you saw those little boxes saying working or finished working with the code interpreter. It was reaching out to an external resource and getting an answer. There's a plugin store. There's a lot of plugins available. All of the Instacart and DoorDash and all have made their own little things, so you can use ChatGPT to order pizza, whatever. But just to give a really quick flavor of what's a plugin, I went in without any plugin, just using the default model, said, who is King Charles III? And it says, well, my training data ended on September 2021. There is, as of that date, there is no King Charles III. However, I think I know who you're talking about, and it goes in and speculates. Then I enabled the Wolfram plugin, just because it's a good general purpose kind of plugin. And now I ask it, and it says, I'm going to check Wolfram for this one instead of just relying on my training data. It goes out, it uses Wolfram, it gets back all kinds of good information about King Charles III and returns it to me. And you can go in if you want and look at what conversation it had with Wolfram. I'm going to start going really quick here because I want to get through the rest of this. There was a Bing plugin right around the same time that Microsoft added ChatGPT to Bing. They also added Bing to ChatGPT and allowed ChatGPT to reach out and query Bing. A few weeks later, they turned that off. They said that it was due to paywall issues, that ChatGPT was querying and getting behind paywalls and returning confidential or restricted content to people. ChatGPT's own statement gave that as an example, but they were vague. They just said, we have learned that ChatGPT can occasionally display content in ways we don't want. My guess is that there's more going on here than just getting behind paywalls, but we'll find out more as time goes on. I'm going to skip over this part right now. I'm going to go right to this Python story very quickly. Dave came to me with a little interim project to work on about scanning the Semantic Arts hard drive and indexing data and putting all that into Turtle. I came into this. I've done a lot of coding in the past. I haven't done a lot in recent years. Kind of rusty with a lot of stuff. I got a lot of help from people here, from colleagues here, getting my environment set up, thinking through how to approach this problem and so on. This is not something that I could do on my own, even with ChatGPT. But when I did go out to ChatGPT and say, write a Python program that reads a directory and returns information about the files in Turtle format, it went ahead and did it. It gave me a pretty decent Python program right away. It told me a little bit about the limitations. It told me I need to install RDF Live and how to do that. I ran it, I wasn't using code interpreter here. I was just copying and pasting into VS Code. I ran it, I got an error, gave the error to Chat. It figured out what was wrong. It was thinking about an older version of RDF Live. The newer version works a little differently. It figured that out. It updated the code, and was looking pretty good. I said, I would like the times to use ISO format. And it says, oh, great, good idea. I'll put the times in RDF format, in ISO format. I pointed out to it that file node isn't that the file node it defined is not a valid IRI. It said, oh, you're right. Here, we'll do this and we'll do that to make it a valid IRI. And then I started, as this code got more complicated, I started showing the code back to ChatGPT. Every chat session you go into is fresh. It's not remembering anything or storing anything from the previous sessions. So I just took this code that it primarily had written, just dropped it into a chat and said, I'd like to work on this program together. It gave me a little precis on what this program is and what it does. I wanted to say I want to change the way IRI minting works, and it suggested maybe using UUIDs. I said I wanted to, give a little more information about how I want to format the IRIs, and and said that I wanted shorter hashes. It went ahead and did all of that. Finally said, put all this together in a single program, gave me a single Python program. It left something out. I said, oops, you left out the short hashes. Oh, okay, got that, fixed it. So I execute this program. Actually, JT ran this for me. I gave JT the Python script, and he ran it against this hard drive. And this is just a tiny bit of the output. So again, I got a lot of help from Dan Carey in particular on how to make this, how to make nice gisty turtle here. But this is what it generated out of the code. And again, mimicking a Python developer, I came into this not at all feeling like I was any kind of developer, and ended up being able to, put something together here that could be given to other people could run, got some documentation for it, just actually wrote most of the, GPT actually wrote most of the documentation. This logo was generated for me by Midjourney. I'm going to skip over this stuff about energy efficiency, except just to say that even the head of OpenAI is saying we can't just keep making these things bigger. It's not economically viable. And this not something that these companies talk about a lot, but it's been in the news, and it's really not a viable business model to run these things like they're running them right now. And with that, I'm going to stop my presentation and hope that there are some questions or comments.
After flying through that. That was fantastic, Steven.
Yeah. Great
job.
Thank you.
So, comments, questions?
Doug, first hand up.
So did anyone else see a thing in the paper the other day about how, well, of course they weren't quite clear, but I think it was OpenAI paid, to eliminate, as part of the training, they elicit feedback from human beings to look at this, and it's essentially a program that says, here are two options, which of these is the more acceptable? And they have to do this a bunch of times. And so OpenAI contracted with a company in Africa to provide people to look at these images, but the stuff that they were being asked to compare were like the most brutal, violent, horrible images that they could possibly find. And that, obviously the model doesn't want to return any of that stuff, but it's forcing people to look at it and go, no, and it's just like utterly depressing stuff.
Yeah, and that's where all that, most of the safety stuff comes from, what do they call it? Reinforcement learning with human feedback.
And they're getting paid, like OpenAI was paying them $20 an hour to the contractor, and the people who were doing it were getting like $2. It was just scandalous, terrible stuff.
And the thing that's bad is these operate as charities.
There's a question in the chat. If you had to take a guess, how much total time this took you to go from 0 to functional? Any guess what that time was?
Really a big part of it was simply being aware of what was possible. I guess, I had to become functional as a Python developer, and that probably took a few days of, working with, Dylan was very helpful to me in this, and, Neil helped me with some of this, and Sean, of just kind of getting a working environment. That took a few days of time. Getting, as far as like learning, how to prompt ChatGPT. I've probably spent, I've probably over the last few months spent, maybe hundreds of hours, at least dozens of hours, just prompting ChatGPT and seeing what it comes back with. A lot of that is natural language, and I think most of the interesting capabilities of ChatGPT for us involve natural language. My examples today were all coding, and coding looks really easy for ChatGPT. It doesn't have all of the ambiguities and complexities and nuances of natural language. It's very rigidly defined. There's tons of examples out there of experts talking about it that it can mine from. Eddie?
Yeah, thanks. So I've played around too, and I feel like the ChatGPT hallucinogen issue is something that I've dealt with, but I only use the free version. With the original file where you were like where you uploaded the big CSV and it was like parsing it. Did you fact check all the information it brought back?
I didn't. If I was gonna do more than show it in a slide, I certainly would. I would load up the data myself and confirm the totals. I don't trust it, and I guess one of the things that in terms of preparation and being able to use ChatGPT in this way, one of the key things for me is that I can read and understand the code. I'm not just saying write some code and then just taking the code and executing it. I'm reading the code. Is it doing what it says it's doing? Is it doing it in a safe way, and so forth? But yeah, no, I mean, I don't trust any of the stuff that it puts out without verifying it myself. Rebecca, you're on mute.
Oh, you're muted.
We've noticed though that it doesn't always write the best code or the way that the most idiomatic code or the way that a really good Python programmer would write it. We encountered this at Pazer where we got some code from ChatGPT and then Patrick looked at it and he said, "Oh, there's a better way to do this."
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When I was going through some stuff with Sean, I just asked it to write a script that did something. I don't even remember what it was, and it did it in a pretty clumsy way. It used arg parse for the command line when all we really needed to do was pull one item out of it. Things like that. Yeah, it's not gonna do it in the optimal way. But I mean, then a person can go in and optimize it. You can probably do more to give it examples. Like give it a list of libraries to use, or there's probably a lot more that could be done with guiding it towards the style of code you want. But it's always going to take, a person's always going to do better with it. Eddie?
Yeah, to kind of move this into what we could, I guess, what you guys could do as ontologists. Like, have you looked at Stardog's? Did you review any of Stardog's LLM? Auto Sparkle generation, or do you have any? Did you want to add any of that to the slide, to the presentation or talk?
Yeah, it would probably be a good idea. I have not used Stardog's feature at all. I've played around a little bit with using ChatGPT to write Sparkle. I haven't gone very deep into it yet, but yeah, that's definitely an area I want to explore more, and it is very relevant to our work. I think the natural language stuff in particular, that is, categorizing things, and just kind of larger scale organizing of information, I think is really promising for that path. And I'm wondering, I can probably get, actually, RDF Lib will run Sparkle, right? You can load up a graph and run Sparkle on it. So should be able to do that through Code Interpreter, actually.
Good talk. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thanks.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Steven.
All right,
Steve,
and let me know if
mention-
anyone wants to follow up on this or talk more.
Yeah.
Another random recent development is you can facet custom instructions now. So you can say like don't mention that you don't have that, like your knowledge cutoff is at September 2021, and then every single thing you ask it'll just skip that whole part, Yeah, custom instructions also, you can tell it your job, your what languages you know of, and where you're based out of. So it's kind of cool. It's just recent, like the last couple days.
Yeah, and what they're doing there is they're stuffing some additional information into that frame before they do their inferencing on the frame. They've got like a little header in there of the instructions that have been given. They've got the content of the current prompt, and they're just kind of stuffing some other stuff. And one of the limitations is that frame size. You know, I mean, you couldn't give it a 100,000 line code script to analyze. It can't fit it in a frame.
Yeah, we need to start holding classes on prompt engineering.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What I found concerning with it, I've played a little bit with it writing Sparkle, is just how certain it seems of everything. Like it'll give me code that's absolute garbage, but it'll start with certainly I can do that. This code will do that, and then it's like very clearly wrong.
That's one of the most disconcerting things
Tell
about
me
these.
you don't know.
When
ChatGPT with tests is better than
Yeah, I
just
also had that
ChatGPT by itself.
experience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there were before they put the Bing plugin in there, several people made web search plugins that could just allow it to go out. You know, you give it a URL and it can go out and get the contents. So I gave it the URL for Gist, and it came back and told me a little bit about Gist, but it also told me that it stood for Generalized Industry Semantic Technology or something like that. And it was, you know, it was quite confident about it. That's what it stands for. Wasn't a guess, you know.
Wow. Well, very good. Thanks
Thank
for taking the time, Steven. I'm sure this, like you said, will be continuing and more info to come. So
Have a good weekend, everyone.
cool.
Thanks,
Thanks
Steve.
all.
Steven.
You
Bye.
too.
Thanks, Steven.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.